What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of The Block is Hot. In this episode, we're going to be covering the most frequently asked question that I get as a content provider, and that's how to know when to get into a project and when to get out of a project. Throughout the video, I'm going to be going over the different market cycles these NFTs have depending on the news they have, as well as give you guys some good examples of projects that are already out there so you can get an idea of how this works in real time. But without further ado, let's get into it. Knowing when to get in and when to get out of a project is actually really important, guys. And even though there are some projects that I'm just holding for the long term and I'm not looking at and I like the community or I want it as a PFP, it is important for the grand scheme of things to know when to get in and when to get out and really strategize there, because a lot of us are investing a decent amount of our money into this, and if you get in at the wrong time, you can literally lose hundreds or even thousands of ADA. And if you don't get out at the right times, then you're potentially shooting your profits and your investment in the foot. And if something goes bad in the overall market, you can find yourself in a bad situation. So this is something that's very important. And the good news is, guys, is that I believe that NFTs are the easiest market to predict out of any single market that you can find yourself investing in. And the main reason is the competition. If you think about it, stocks, crypto, real estate, commodities, these industries, these assets are dominated by the big names in the game. Big banks, big hedge funds, big institutions, computer programs, bots, companies with teams of hundreds of people that do this and study this for a living. And we're competing against those guys. So of course we're not going to have as great odds, especially when we don't have the education and the tools and the resources. Now, what's cool about NFTs in particular is it's not dominated by big hedge funds yet. It's not dominated by big businesses yet. There aren't a bunch of computers that are manipulating all of these different markets. The main thing that we need to do and we need to compete with is essentially other people, as bad as that may sound. We need to basically psychologically understand how different pieces of news are going to affect the majority of people. And based on how the majority of people are affected, we need to change our strategy and for the most part take the opposite approach. So essentially NFTs are just one big mind game, and that's why I really love trading it, because it's honestly fun to try to strategize what other people are going to do. With all that being said, guys, let's just get into this. So there are two different types of projects. There are new projects that just came out or that are in their minting phase, and then there are current projects that have been out for a while. And with a new project, there are three different outcomes and three different phases. It can either be a good mint, an okay mint with a decent project, or a bad mint. And within these different outcomes, there are different phases. So let's start off with a good mint, guys. What is a good mint? Well, a good mint is whenever a project comes out and it sells out really quickly, and there's a ton of hype and there's a ton of FOMO and people are freaking out that they couldn't get in. And a great example of this, guys, is Pendulum that just released yesterday. They released for 100 ADA. I was a little bit worried with how much the ADA was with the supply. They wanted about 500,000 ADA, but they ended up doing pretty well and they sold out fast, and I would consider this a good mint. And essentially what happened here, guys, is people freak out because they didn't get in or they, slept on the release, and they see it going up like crazy, and all of a sudden they want to buy and they want to get in and they're freaking out, right? What happened with Pendulum is it went from 100 ADA all the way to 200 ADA, and that's when we hit our peak of P1. In this situation, guys, if you got in at the mint down here, you want to make sure that you're selling sometime in this P1. Now, we have no idea how high P1 is going to go. In this situation, it was a double up all the way to 200. But we do know that we want to try to sell in this time frame. And that's why I tell a lot of people to have a number in mind if you're trying to quick flip something. If you're just trying to hold something for the long term, don't pay too much attention here. But then essentially what happens, guys, is we hit this peak and people start taking profits. And that's why you want to, take profits before the peak. Look for whole numbers. Like in this case, 200 was a double up and a clean number. So, think of psychological numbers people might take profits at and sell before that. But then what happens, guys, is people sell and the price drops a pretty significant amount, and then it eventually bottoms and people are like, oh crap, like this is a really good time to get in again. And by the way, guys, this is happening very, very quickly. And what happens now is we go on this kind of wiggle waggle, swishly swoosh, and we go up and down and up and down. And this is called phase 2, which is the discovery phase. So phase 1 was the initial phase, which direction we're going to go. And then phase 2 is this discovery phase where people are really trying to discover where this price is meant to be. And then eventually, guys, we bottom out and we start getting very, very consistent, and the price range starts getting very, very tight. And that's exactly what happened with Pendulum. We started at 100 ADA here. We went all the way up to 200 ADA here at the peak because this was a good mint and there was a lot of FOMO. We then dropped pretty significantly, let's just say all the way down to 130 ADA. And then it went to 160 ADA. And then it went down to 120 ADA. And then it went up to 150 ADA. It kept getting tighter and tighter and tighter in this discovery phase. And then eventually what happens, guys, in this phase 3, we are now discovered as far as the price goes. And that discovered phase is now this 130 ADA range. The way you know that you are now discovered and not in the discovery phase is when volume slows down a lot and the range in between the prices slows down a lot. So for example, in phase 2 here, maybe we were going between a range of 180 and 120. It just kept bouncing off these different levels as people were really trying to figure out where we were. In phase 3, however, maybe we're trading between 130 and like 145. So the spread is a lot smaller and the volume is a lot lower. And that to me means that the calm of the storm has left and most likely we have been in the discovered phase. Now, as far as the best time of getting into this project, you really wanted to get in right here when it minted. And that's why you need to, do your research about projects and figure out which projects are going to do really well and have a really good mint and are going to have a lot of FOMO and hype after the release. The worst time to get in is P2 in the discovery phase. This is the riskiest time because we have no idea where this price is really going to settle or what the discovered price target or market value of this project is really going to be. So getting in at this P2 is the worst time possible. You really want the dust to settle as far as limiting your risk. Now, you could make more money if it went all the way down to 100, for example, and you got in at a really good price there. But personally, for me, it's just a very risky time. I would rather wait till P3 when the dust has settled and now you can get in for a long-term hold if you do like this project. Once phase 3 is over and the price is settled, we are now in the current project phase, which I'll be going over after these 2 other scenarios. Scenario number 2 is when we have an okay mint, but the project is still decent. What do I mean by this? Well, I mean that the project sold out, but because they had too much supply or they wanted too much ADA or maybe too many flippers and not enough long-term holders got into this project, it actually goes down in the short term pretty significantly. And that's what, in my opinion, happened to Mandrills. Mandrills came out. We are at the floor of this. There is a lot of hype. There is a lot of buildup, and they sell out their project. And what happens is if you're one of the first people to get your NFT into your wallet, you can sell this right away in phase 1, the initial price movement phase, and hopefully make a decent amount of money. You set those price targets. So for example, I believe Mandrills, and I can't remember exactly, was maybe like 50 ADA or 55 ADA, and they went all the way to like 100 ADA off of the rip. But then what happens, guys, is because there was too much supply, because there were too many flippers, because et cetera, we actually take a pretty significant drop downwards. And now we are entering this phase 2. This phase 2, when it comes to these okay projects, is very similar to the phase 2 of a good mint project. People are just trying to discover what the real market value is of this project. However, with an okay mint, maybe this is a price that is below mint or at a price where you're really not making too much money because they didn't really have enough genuine hype and FOMO to get a really good initial pump up. Because in this situation, guys, maybe the initial pump up was 100 to 200 ADA, which is what happened. And now when it settled all the way in P3, we're looking at 130. With something like Mandrills, maybe it cost 50 50 ADA to get in, it only went to like, let's say 80 to 100 ADA, which I guess is a double up, but wasn't a super large amount in this situation. So that when it went into this phase 2 phase of people taking profits, instead of it going from 200 to 150, it then instead went from like 80 all the way back down to 50. So it's not a very profitable thing. And that's why you would really want to, in this situation, sell in P1. But essentially what happens in the long term with this is because it's a decent project, maybe over time, because more flippers get out of the project and more long-term people get in, maybe over the time that floor slowly starts to rise, and then it eventually balances out in this P3 phase or in this discovery phase, and then jumps into the current project charting. The last scenario that can happen here, guys, is the worst case scenario, and that was that it was a bad mint. Maybe it didn't sell out. Maybe it was a rug pull. And in this situation, instead of having a phase 1 initial pump upwards like we do in scenario 1 and scenario 2, instead of that, we actually just dropped down because it didn't sell out. It was a bad mint. They wanted too much money. There wasn't enough interest in the project. You shouldn't have minted the project. And then in this phase 2, instead of having a lot of ups and downs, for the most part, it's just down. And then eventually it'll get to a pretty low price that is a decent amount less than what you paid for, and it'll kind of stay there. In this situation, if you find yourself in a bad mint, in my opinion, do more research next time, realize that it's going to happen to everyone, and just sell your project. Because for the most part, if it is a bad mint, you don't want to count on it eventually going crazy out of nowhere. Most of the time, these projects are kind of dead, and it's better to get whatever ADA, scrap ADA that you can get and put that into the next project, in my opinion. Fresh Mutant Clicks was a great example of this, and that's why I don't mint projects that don't have a website, guys. I'd put this in an upcoming CNFT video and said that a lot of people like the art, but that I wasn't going for it because it didn't look like they were doing enough. And look here, guys, this is less than half of what the mint price is. If you have one of these Mutant Clicks, it's like, what's the point of holding on to this, hoping that it'll go up a lot more in the future when they're obviously not delivering on simple stuff like a website? So in this situation with this bad mint, it literally just collapsed after the mint because it didn't go well. And now's a good time to just sell it, get your ADA out, and put it into the next thing, and just kind of take that L. Now, once you're done with this new project phase, we are now in the current project phase, which I think a lot more people are going to be interested in. And essentially what happens, guys, is there's 4 different phases here. There's the boring phase, which is P1. There's the news announcement, which is P2. There is peak hype, which is P3. And P4 is profit taking / used utility. And I follow this religiously when it comes to different swing trades, or when it comes to just finding the best entry price and exit price to these different projects. Essentially what happens here, guys, is let's say we have a good mint up here, and we eventually get to P3. All of these get to P3, but most of the time we're just looking at scenario 1 and 2 because we just totally ditched 3. As you'll see here, guys, it kind of flatlines. It gets very tight, and there isn't a lot of movement that happens. And this, in my opinion, is the boring phase, or P1. There isn't a lot going on. There isn't any crazy news. There are a lot of people keeping it. Maybe the community's building. Maybe it goes down a little bit, but not much is happening. Now, what happens, though, is phase 2, if it's a good project. Phase 2 is some sort of news announcement that builds up a lot of hype. Think of a whitelist to a future project. Think of airdrops, right? Think of some sort of token drop. Think of some sort of partnership. Maybe they just partnered with Snoop Dogg like Clay Nation did, right? These are all big pieces of news. Maybe they have a metaverse. Maybe they're creating a DAO. Maybe they had some sort of collab that wasn't necessarily a partner. This right here, guys, are all Catalyst news. And these pieces of news are going to influence the mindset and decision-making of other investors out there. And don't worry, I'm going to be going over a couple projects in a little bit here. But what happens is a project will announce something big, such as Clay Nation. And I'll bring up Smooth Yeti Mountain Club in this example. And all of a sudden, we went from phase 1 where no one was really paying attention to all of a sudden there's a lot more hype in the project. And we go on a really great run up as more and more people are finding out about this news. And then everyone that was in this phase 1, this boring phase, is like, holy crap, dude, look at how much it went up. Let me take some profits. And that's when we get a dip. And then what happens is that dip is then bought, because once again, we're leading up to this actual news and actual utility being released. And then what happens is we continue to shoot up all the way to, and sometimes we might take profits, but we get all the way to this phase 3, which is the peak hype. Peak hype is when this stuff occurs. Peak hype is when Boss Cat Rocket Club says, hey, we'll give you 2 Vox Cats, or we'll give you a Vox Cat for every 2 Boss Cats you have. Or if you have a rocket part, you're going to get a Vox Cat. This is where we're at with this phase 3. We are finally able to get this utility. People are FOMOing in because they want to get that Vox Cat. They want to get that whitelisting. Maybe it's some sort of big token airdrop where they're like, holy crap, dude, let me buy, Rats DAO, for example. Let me buy these rats when they were at 150 over here in phase 1, when people were really bored, not paying attention to it. They announced the news. Now all of a sudden they were at 200 over here. It started heating up as we get closer to the date. Now we're at 250. And then all the way up to the point where they're doing their token airdrop. Now we're sitting at 300. But then what happens, guys, is all of these people that got in and had this really big push up into this phase 3, either weren't long-term holders of this project, or they were FOMOing in, or whatever the case is, or they were like, oh my God, I need to get in. Look at how much this has moved up in this phase 2 phase when the hype was building and more people were finding out about this. And then what always happens, guys, literally what always happens is after this utility is done in the peak hype, we now have people profit taking / use the utility / are getting out of the project now. And we drop significantly into this phase 4. And then what happens, guys, is we go back into phase 1, this boring phase of price discovery, of trying to figure out where the actual price of the market is. And then if it's a good project, this starts all over again. With Boss Cat Rocket Club, hey, we have more Boss Planet releasing. Hey, we have these Boss, rocket parts releasing. Hey, we have this partnership, stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, this cycle repeats. Now, with that being said, when is the best time and the worst time to get into the project? Well, guys, the best time to get into a project, if it's a good project, and if you know their roadmap, and if you know they are a project that is going to deliver, is the boring phase. And this is the phase that no one pays attention to because we're literally just flatlining for the longest time and nothing has been happening. Depending on the project, this could be 1 month, this could be 2 months, this could be 3 months, this could be 6 months. This is the patient part of swing trading. This is when you get in with the intention of, hey, I know not a lot of people are paying attention to this right now, but I know something big is going to happen in the future. Let me get in now and let me wait for that stuff to happen. Now, most people don't get in at phase 1, guys, because it's boring. There aren't a lot of eyes on it. They might not know about the project, and there's a little amount of hype, right? Basically all things that I love when it comes to investing into a project. And I'll bring up Smooth Yeti Mountain Club, for example, here. Smooth Yeti Mountain Club was going anywhere from 30 ADA to 100 ADA for the longest time. And that's when I started buying these up. And the reason is because I liked their website. I liked their team, and I thought their team was going to be able to deliver. I liked how they were marketing, but most importantly, I saw and read their roadmap, and they said that there was going to be another drop in season 2. What is another drop? Well, guys, it's over here. That is a Catalyst piece of information that is going to build hype. It's going to put more eyes on the project. And because of that, that is going to increase the price of the project. So if you believe that the team is actually going to deliver and you see in their roadmap that they have something big planned, then getting in at phase 1 is a no-brainer. But most of the time, people don't get into phase 1. So what do? Well, the next best time to get into a project is phase 2. And the great thing is we know how long phase 2 is going to last. For example, of Mountain Yeti Club. It's been a long day, guys. Basically, they said, hey, we're going to have snowmobile parts, right? We don't know the date yet. Price starts shooting up because people are like, holy crap, I need to own a Yeti to get the whitelist. Like, let me buy. Why do I know, guys, how long phase 2 is going to last? Because I know the release date of these parts. So if they come out and say that these parts are going to drop on the 30th of the month, and right now it's the 1st of the month, I know that I have 30 days before the main utility happens with this project. So what's really crazy about the Smooth Yeti Mountain Club right now is that we're in phase 2, but we don't even have a release date yet. So where are we in this phase 2? Well, potentially, guys, we can be right here, and this was 450, and then we had a pullback all the way down to this 300 level, and then we might have another run up all the way to, let's say, 500, 600. We might have a push down all the way back down to 400, 450 again, and then leading up to the actual day, like a couple days before the drop, maybe 3 days before the drop. I don't know why that D is so bad, but maybe 3 days before the drop, we are about to get to P3, which is where we hit the peak of this project. And then what happens, guys, is when we hit P3 and all these people bought the Yetis in order to get those parts, all of a sudden is after P3, after the 30th, we know a lot of people that FOMO'd in last minute to be able to get into these parts are going to start selling their Yetis. And then what happens, guys? We go down and we go down and we go down and we go down. And what's really beautiful here is in this phase 4, when people take profit and the utility has been used and people were able to get their snowmobile parts, they freak out and they sell. And then we get all the way back down to P1 again, the boring phase, where the main utility is over and people stop paying attention to the project and the hype starts to die down. It's absolutely beautiful, guys, because what you'll realize is you get in at P1, you sell right before P3, so you don't even get the whitelist, you don't get these Yeti parts. You wait until this crashes down in P4 because everyone who, minted the parts and used the utility are now taking profits and freaking out. And then we restart phase 1. This is where you buy. This is where you buy. And this is like the whole emphasis of the video here, guys. You want to buy in phase 1, in the boring phase, when no one is paying attention. And you want to sell right before phase 3, right before that peak hype. And you want to buy back in at phase 1. And now you hold this thing for a month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever the case is. And when they announce their next thing, like the Yetiverse land, which is eventually going to happen, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to sell when the hype comes back because they're going to announce this. What is this, guys? This is P2. What is P2? The news announcement. What happens in P2? We start having a run up because hype is here and FOMO is happening and a lot of people are buying in. Once again, sell at P3, right before P3. Don't take those parts. Don't use the whitelisting. 90% of the time, what you're going to get from the whitelisting actually wasn't worth it, and you're much better off selling the original NFT, and then boom, crashes, buy back in again, rinse and repeat, make money swing trading, and that's literally what I do and has been the most consistent money maker for me. With all that being said, I wanted to bring up a couple project examples and the different phases they're in and kind of my mindset on things. Project number 1 is the Mandrills. Mandrills have been in the discovered phase for a very long time now. They have had a tight range between 50 and 60 ADA for literally since they've released. And this is what I call the boring phase, phase 1. This is when, if you believe in the long-term vision of the project and you believe in the team and you believe in their marketing and you know there's going to be stuff in the future, this is when you buy this project and you just wait and hold on to it. And now what happened, guys? They announced that on April 5th, they are going to release their roadmap or essentially their white paper of what they're going to do with this project. That is a news announcement. What is a news announcement? A news announcement is a Catalyst event. What does a Catalyst event start? It starts phase 2, which is the initial run-up of this project and the initial hype building of this project. So people are buying these right now, and it went from 50 to 75 ADA literally this week alone, and leading up to that announcement, these could potentially go even higher. Now, before that announcement, you can either sell it, or you can say, hey, there's probably going to be more hype after this announcement because who knows what they're going to announce, right? And then what happens if they announce something big? We just keep going up and up and up. And then right before they have their big release or their P3, that's when we sell. And then P4 happens where it crashes. And then we get back in at P1 in the boring phase and we just wait. Chilled Kongs, another great example. This project right now, in my opinion, is in P1. It is in the boring phase. We had a picture of, what their roadmap is going to be. We got a graphic, and we know that there is going to be a trippy mushroom that these chilled Kongs are going to be able to consume in the future. So what's going to happen, guys, when they release images of these different trippy Kongs? And what's going to happen right before you're able to actually mutate these? We are going to go into phase 2. We are going to have a run-up leading up to the release of those trippy shrooms. And then right before that release of that, or right before the utility, that's when I'm probably going to sell my chilled Kong. Because there's a world, guys, where we're in this boring phase. These are 610. There's a world that all of a sudden, these go up to 13, 14, 1500 ADA right before that trippy mushroom. That profit is guaranteed, and you can lock it in if this happens and if you can sell it. You know what's not guaranteed? The amount of money you're going to make from those trippy Kongs. Most of the time, you're better off selling the chilled Kong. You're better off letting other people buy into the hype and FOMO, and potentially you could have made more money, but this is the much safer route. And then you buy chilled Kongs again, or you buy those trippy Kongs when they come out and people are just dumping them and freaking out. Boss Cat Rocket Club is another example of this, but this is an example of a phase 4 just occurring. They had the phase 1, nothing was going on. Phase 2, they announced, hey, we have these Vox Cats. We had a run up all the way up to this Vox Cat, where you had to be whitelisted. People bought in and FOMO'd. These cats went all the way to 2,200 to 2,300 floor. Then all of a sudden, top of phase 3, you were able to get your snapshot for this airdrop. And then all of a sudden, guys, all the people that had cats and parts and all that stuff in order to get that airdrop, now all of a sudden they sold. That is the P4 all the way down. And these jumped all the way down to 1,500 ADA. That would have been the time to buy it. And now it's in the boring phase again. And what's going to happen is, because this project releases stuff all the time, they're going to release Boss Planet probably in the next month, I believe. And then these cats are going to have a run up once again leading up to that Boss Planet drop, because people are going to want that land. Right now is the time to buy something like this, especially when it jumped down to 1,500 ADA, which I had called in my upcoming market update video. That is how you successfully do a swing. You buy at 1,500 after phase 4 ended and phase 1 starts, and you just wait until they do a phase 2, they make the announcement, and you sell on that run up. Smooth Yeti Mountain Club, I personally think these are going to continue to run all the way to the parts drop. We know, guys, that this is currently in phase 2, and we know the end date of phase 2. They're supposed to release those snowmobiles sometime later in the month, so we know that there's a really high chance that these continue to run up leading up to that part drop, because there's going to be more people that FOMO in last minute. That's when I'm going to sell most of my Yetis. I'm going to keep a lot because I actually like Yetis, and I think long-term they're going to do really well, but I have like over 20 of them. So I can't even get parts on all of them. So I'm going to sell some of them right before that drop, right before the peak of P3. I'm going to sell some of those, and then I'm going to buy in P4 and hold it throughout P1 and just wait for their next announcement, their Yetiverse, maybe in a couple months, because then they'll have another run up. And odds are I'm going to make more money flipping the Yeti than the amount of money that I'm going to make from the parts, most likely. Clay Nation is a crazy example of this. In a sense, is just a unique example of a collaboration with Snoop Dogg, where all of a sudden these went from 1,300 ADA all the way to 3,000 ADA in the matter of hours. This was a Catalyst News event. You know what paid off is getting into this project in P1 where nothing was happening. We knew that the Clayverse was going to come out soon. We knew 4 months ago that they had teased that Snoop Dogg was part of this project. It was only a matter of time before they announced this. And that's why I literally bought a Clay Nation at about 1,300 ADA. Look, guys, they made one announcement and it jumped up to 3,000 ADA. Now I can potentially sell this for 1,700 ADA right now. But we're technically still in P2. Now, remember though, that chart of P2, there are pullbacks and there are profit takings. So there's a chance that this chills out here at 3,000 and this goes all the way back down to 2,000 again or 2,500 again. And then it has another bounce up when they announce some huge thing with Snoop Dogg, like one of these high clay drops that is going to happen soon. And then these are going to continue to run up until P3, massive profit taking. You guys get the deal. Now, I wanted to bring up one interesting project right now, and that's Ape Society and what they're doing, because it makes my job a lot more difficult as far as figuring out what price to get in at. And that's because they have all of this bullish stuff happening, such as this token. But the way they're doing the token is instead of doing a snapshot airdrop, they're basically saying, hey, you have to delist your ape for all of these different epochs. And depending on how many epochs it's delisted is how many tokens you're going to get. This is really smart because it doesn't create a specific P3, right? This is not creating a P3 moment where we know the specific date of when something is going to happen. Because if we know the specific date, then we can time the peak of P3 and we can time when to get in at P4. But because they're not launching those dates, there's no way to time this. So as far as getting into a project like this, it's really just about long-term vision. And that's why I bought one of these apes at like 1,350 ADA, because I personally think that this project is going to do really well in the long term. And I don't want to keep sitting on the sidelines waiting for this project to take off. So this is one of those situations where there's definitely a lot more risk because we're not swing trading. We're not catalyst trading here. We're really just buying into the project at a random price, hoping that we got in at the right price. But if you are a really long-term investor, you shouldn't care if you got in at 1,300 and it goes to 2,000. You shouldn't care if you got in at 1,300 and it went to 700. If you were willing to make an investment like this without having those specific dates in mind, you really just have to be holding this for the long term. That is kind of the situation when it comes to projects like the Ape Society, where there isn't a specific time. Now, they might announce a specific day for their cabin sale, and that would be a good time to sell right before the cabin sale. I'm probably going to hold mine just because I really like the Ape Society now, and I like the community they have, and I just want to hold it, to be honest with you. But if you're a logical investor, you'd probably sell right before that cabin date and then get in, P4. Same thing that I said with all these other projects. Now, I want to bring up a couple points here before I end this video. Point number one is that you always have to have NFTs that are set aside for long-term investing that you don't touch. It is hard to predict markets sometimes. I think that trading off this Catalyst News and these swing tradings, like I taught you guys, has been extremely, extremely consistent for me. But you always have to have projects that you're just holding on the side because you never know what's going to happen. For me, what I like to do is I have a Yoroi wallet where you can only send one NFT at a time from. And I have it hooked up to a Ledger Nano S. So for me to send something out of that wallet is such a pain in the ass that I don't do it. So it forces me to hold those NFTs for a long term. The second thing I want to say here is that even if you're not into swing trading, this is a very good way of being able to find a good price to get into these different projects. You don't want to FOMO into stuff right before a major drop or some sort of major utility. Don't do that. That's how you lose money 9 out of 10 times. You're much better off waiting for a P4 to happen where we crash down and then buy in at P1, or buy in at a project that's already at P1 that you know something is going to happen in the future. Because let's face it, guys, that is the best time to get in. And then maybe you can hold that for the long term and never sell that, but that's going to be your best time. If you want to invest into a project that doesn't have a set P3 date, like it's like, hey, like let's say Snowmobiles was releasing randomly and we don't know what exactly day it's going to be, then just realize that that's a lot more risky and that you have to have a long-term mindset and you can't care if the price swings a lot, because it's probably going to swing a lot at random and you can't really predict how high or low you're going to be at. And the last thing that I want to bring up here is swing trading is phenomenal for people that can be active and for people that keep up to date with all the different information in the ecosystem, because there's always something new happening and there's always some sort of hype building. So if you're someone that's newer or doesn't have a lot of money but has time to work on their computer, then I'd highly suggest doing the swing trading off of Catalyst News, because that's going to make you a lot more money than simply buying a project and holding it for the long term. You really want to be getting in and out of stuff if you're in that sort of position. But remember, guys, we are going to want to have some projects that we just hold for the long term. And lastly here, I just want to say, guys, that my brain is absolutely fried, and I'm sorry that this video is decently long. I'm assuming, I have no idea how long it's going to be. Trying to take this information that is, in a sense, complicated and try to figure out a way to enunciate it in a way that a lot of people are going to understand is very difficult. So if you appreciate the struggles that I'm going through here trying to put this content out, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Follow the Twitter, join the Discord, whatever you want to do to support the channel. But yeah, I hope everyone here has an awesome day, and I hope you guys learned something.